Welcome to Dustin Cathro Book Reviews.
Hey guys, Dustin Cathro here. Welcome back to my book review channel. Today we're going to be unpacking a book in American literature, and that is Jack Kerouac's On the Road. It's been around a long time. There's been a lot of people that have analyzed and reviewed this book, obviously, but I hope that I can give you some interesting insights into what I think about this book and how it has aged and what it means in today's culture and society, and how it has even impacted today's culture and society, especially in the United States of America. Like so many great artists or writers, Jack Kerouac is no exception to how he does it. He essentially is a university dropout that was writing a football scholarship, but his true passion and his true love has always been writing. And so he did what anyone does, is he drops out of university and he pursues his passion. But how he finds inspiration is on the road, which is the title of the book, obviously. And so what On the Road really undertakes is the adventures of a group of men and women that go out and are trying to find the meaning to life, or to essentially live life to the fullest. So in the novel, Jack, also known as Sal in the novel, he's trying to separate himself from common American society, the cog in the wheel. You know, how everyone is, buying houses and cars and getting married and doing these very conventional kind of things in the 1940s, 1950s kind of era. And what Jack and his buddies and friends are doing is they're living a very unconventional life. And they're kind of doing it by the seat of their pants, but at the same time, they're using things that are provided from the society they're trying to escape. So there's kind of like this conundrum of them using, trains, cars, and all sorts of forms of transportation that are relevant to the Industrial Revolution. But at the same time, they're trying to escape that industrialization and robotic kind of automated life. But at the same time, they're using the tools that are created by that to go on these epic adventures that are essentially the meaning to their life and experience. There's also this kind of sensationalist kind of expression around being homeless, or a hobo as they call them in the novel, and how these people are living this kind of raw and real life. And I think it's kind of an interesting idea, because in some way and form that is true. These people are living this really raw, real, rough kind of life, but at the same time their dependency on other people that are the cog in the wheel is very evident. And this happens often when Sal is talking about his aunt. And so his aunt is always lending him money when he's on the road. He's kind of mailing her a letter and saying, hey, can I borrow $50? Which back then was a lot of money to, you could do something with $50 back then. And she'd send him this money and he would continue his adventures. So anytime Sal gets in a jam, he always has that safety net of his aunt who will send him money. And it's kind of a common theme with a lot of the characters in the story, like as they're trying to do this unconventional thing, they are often falling back on family or friends to help them out of that and to continue on their journey or experience to find the meaning to their life, or to find spontaneous activities to do where they become absorbed into reality, or absorbed into the moment. And so it's a common theme in the book, though. I think that also it's worth noting that there is one character that never really has anyone that has their back, and that is Dean in the story. Also, that's Neil Cassidy in real life. And he doesn't really have that kind of safety net like Sal has. And so I think that having that safety net and not having that safety net is a big difference. And I think that is a part of why Neil Cassidy is able to live in the moment even greater than someone like Sal in the story, and so many other characters that are also trying to follow the lead of Neil, who clearly he's all in all the time, and he's going with his impulse. He's kind of a hedonist kind of character. And so I find that kind of an interesting idea and contradiction of, the dependency on family, but also the willingness to go out and get uncomfortable and do all these things, but still have the safety net. So it's kind of an interesting idea, and I think that Jack Kerouac probably couldn't have done what he did without his aunt. I mean, he also wouldn't become the Jack Kerouac we know without any of these things that he did, trying to break free from the system and the cog and the wheel that so destroyed his soul, I guess. And I guess him being at a young age, realizing that this thing was destroying his potential and his individuality, I think that's a really powerful statement that the book is kind of saying in an undertone. Like, to meet your full potential, you have to go out there and find experience, and you have to learn these things that you can only really learn on the road, and things that you can't really learn in a classroom or doing the conventional things. And so I think what we'll find as a theme is that excellent people are not usually conventional people, at least in the sense that the way that he's going about living his life and doing things, he's actually doing things that people don't really do. And so he's getting results that people don't usually get in, like, life satisfaction and a bunch of other things like that. Sal has this draw to people that are kind of madmen, and I don't mean it as in like the TV show Mad Men. I mean like Dean and Carlo in the story are people that are kind of crazy. They're kind of crazy, and they're kind of madmen, and they're willing to do crazy things and talk about crazy things and just take life by the horns and embrace whatever comes, even if it doesn't make sense, because the whole point of it is to embrace that spontaneous kind of thing happening. And I think that Carlo and Dean are these really mad kind of people. And I think that if you do a little research, those people are evidently madmen in history as well. For anyone that doesn't know, Carlo Marx is actually Allen Ginsberg, which is a famous American poet and writer who is good friends with Jack. And though it might not be obvious, maybe in the novel, that's who it is. And just go and read some of his work, and you realize that, wow, this person is mad. And that's what Jack Kerouac was always after. He was trying to find the maddest people he could find and follow them around and learn all he could about embodying this madness that he himself too suffered from. Even though he does claim in the novel that there was more of a sadness to him, I think that he too was a madman, and that's why he did all the things he did, and that's why he wrote On the Road. And he has a bunch of other great books, like one of them on my shelf back here, Dharma Bumps, one of my favorite. Great author, really trying to embody some sort of philosophy that he himself maybe wasn't even sure of. I think it's worth noting that Dean in the novel is a very controversial figure, because he's kind of like idolized by so many of the characters, but at the same time he has all these negative things about him. Like, he by definition really is like a hedon, and he's very irresponsible, kind of he's kind of stuck with like a Peter Pan syndrome, almost, we could call it. He takes no responsibility for his actions, and he has all these baby mamas and wives and divorces going on in his life, and all these children that he is not taking any responsibility for. And it's interesting that he's so idolized for his strengths, but his weaknesses are so great that they really bring him down, I feel like. And obviously he's a real person that wasn't taking all these responsibilities. And so I think that, for me, reading through the novel, it's hard to understand how somebody could be so irresponsible, especially when there's like children involved and stuff like that. But it kind of goes back to that theme that Dean is a madman, and he can't even contain himself or control himself. He has a lot of bad things about him, and lots of brilliant, great, beautiful things about him too, but he can't help himself. And I think that shows up a lot later in the book as well, when you know, Dean's kind of this immortalized character. You know, he's the Ubermensch and like really Nietzschean kind of. He's a man's man, his own individual. But you really see some mortality to Dean throughout the novel as it keeps going linearly, and you see that as he's aging and breaking, his thumb's all messed up from hitting his wife, and also he's like hurting his muscles and pulling muscles, hurting himself, breaking bones. You start to realize that he is a mortal man and that he's not this god-like creature that so many think him to be. And so it's kind of this humbling moment where I think Sal in the book he's looking at Dean and he's like, what the heck? Like, this guy is not who I thought he is. Like, he's still this great, like, angelic kind of like creature or person and saint, they even call him, the holy goof. They call him a bunch of different things. But I think that Sal, towards gearing to the end of the book, kind of sees Dean as the con man that people are saying he is throughout the book. But he also sees the good in Dean as well, which I think is a beautiful thing, because Jack Kerouac, kind of known for loving humanity, I would say, and loving the hobos, and even loving Dean Moriarty, Neil Cassidy rather, who's a wreck of a man, leaving chaos behind him as a trail anywhere he goes, but still loves the guy and still is best friends with him, despite his cons, let's call it. I think someone could really enjoy this book too if they don't know much about the history of jazz music in the United States. Obviously, an American invention, jazz music, and in this book, Jack Kerouac is a lover of jazz, and you can tell he talks about it as like, they say like God's in the room, or like God's arrived, as the musicians, tooting his horn kind of thing, and they kind of just capture these moments of spontaneous things happening, and like how those are the moments that people live for, and those are the moments that people are the most alive, that are happening spontaneously. And so I really like that theme in the book, that there's this like spontaneous kind of objective to life, which makes it so great and exhilarating and things like that. So I think I think Sal really appreciates that in the novel, and I think that Jack Kerouac did a really great job in showing his love for jazz music and love for the spontaneous. I think that rides on this idea that God in the book is like this manifestation of the spontaneous events that are happening, and that they point it out to each other. Him and Dean are just like, God is in the room, and they're really like, oh, this is like, you're so immersed into your life that you don't even know that you're living it, but you are, kind of thing. And I think there's a lot of Buddhism, kind of Eastern philosophy principles that are coming out in Kerouac's work. Even though he grew up in Catholicism, I think that in his later life too, if you know any little bit of history, I think that he later kind of converted back to Catholic. And I think that, which is a common thing, I think, once you're Catholic, you're always Catholic, people say. And I think that Jack Kerouac kind of lived this kind of Buddhist kind of moment in a lot of his books, but I think that he retreated back to his roots in the long run, in the end. Something that I wanted to note as well is that Sal, throughout the story, he's kind of looking for love all the time. He's really dead set on finding some crazy person to spend the rest of his life with, which I think is a beautiful thing. That we should all be trying to find that crazy person that kind of brings out the best in us, and that you can live that kind of spontaneous kind of life, or that they make you feel like you can be yourself fully with them, because that's kind of what the book's about. It's kind of being your full individual self and not being afraid to say something crazy even if it doesn't make sense, or do the crazy thing that doesn't make any sense, because I think that's what inspired Jack Kerouac. This whole thing that he did with Neil Cassidy, going all across the country like madmen, all the adventures and misadventures it all led to this beautiful inspiration for him to write On the Road, which originally was called The Scroll, I think. Don't quote me on that. Anyway, he did all this to be inspired to live, to fulfill his dreams of becoming a writer. And there's so much history, I think, in this book, and so much that inspired American culture. And obviously this took place before the 1960s, which was the hippie movement. This was the Beats. The Beats essentially inspired the hippie movement, and things like LSD and music was really taking a different change. And I think Jack Kerouac was a part of that undercurrent that kind of brought the hippie movement up into its glory. So these are huge deals. These are big moments in human history, even on how books and people can shape cultural revolutions, in a sense. Did they last? Did the hippie movement make a long-term difference? That's for another topic, not related to the book maybe, but kinda. A question that remains, and I'm unsure, is Neal Cassady, or Dean, is he a sociopath? I was always thinking about this throughout the book. He was kind of always out for his own good, and he never really cared about anyone too much unless it was kind of in his interest. And I was always thinking that maybe he had an underlying condition of some kind. I'm not sure. I want to unpack that a bit, but I'm not going to do that in this video. But it's something to think about. Was Neal Cassady a sociopath? In the sense that he could care less about anyone but himself, and didn't care what consequences awaited at the end of the line. He was obviously, in and out of jail, and had all these relationships and children, and didn't really seem to care about it. We don't have his side of the story. We only have Sal's, and I think that he wasn't a good guy, but that doesn't mean that he wasn't a madman, and doesn't mean that he couldn't live life to the fullest, but I don't think he was a good guy by any means. Before I go on any more rants, I think that I should just conclude this, because I could talk about this book for hours, really. And just to make it more precise, On the Road is an inspiring book. And like I said, it kind of has the undercurrents that brought up the hippie movement in the 1960s. And you can really sense the culture change coming in this book. You can feel this kind of Eastern philosophy kind of seeping into American culture, and people kind of realizing that they don't want to be the cog in the wheel, and how Jack Kerouac and his friends were a big inspiration behind that, behind the change, behind wanting to do something different that's not so conventional. Even though I would say a lot of them went on to go live conventional lives after the fact, but I would say that the non-conventional things that they were doing inspired them to be great. Just like On the Road. It's a great book, and Jack Kerouac really sent it home. So I'm going to say, guys, in conclusion, On the Road is an amazing book in American literature. It has its faults, and it has its moments of hedonism and questionable morality, but I think that its main message is good, because I think it intends to inspire, and I think that art that inspires is great art, and I think that this book does that, and I think that's the whole point. Most people want to inspire people to do better, be better, and to do something beautiful and unique, and I think Jack Kerouac does that. So On the Road, 10 out of 10 all day, even with its cons and pros, and even with its Neal Cassady, it's still great. Alright guys, till next time, Dustin Cathro here. Stay tuned.